A bride walks into the room. Everyone turns. The dress is white. For many people, that image feels timeless, classic, traditional, almost automatic. A white wedding dress seems so normal now that it can feel like brides have always worn white. But that is not true. For much of history, brides did not all wear white. They wore what made sense for their culture, their family, their money, their religion, their region, or simply the best dress they owned. So how did white become the color so many people expect at a wedding? Was it always about purity? Was it always religious? Or did one very famous bride help turn a fashion choice into a tradition? I'm Earl, the creator of Everyday Sayings and Origins. To keep each episode consistent, I use my digital likeness. Now back to the story. Today, in many Western weddings, white is treated as the classic bridal color. Not every bride wears it, not every culture expects it, and not every wedding follows the same tradition, but the white dress has become one of the strongest images in modern wedding culture. It appears in movies, in bridal shops, in magazines, in old family photos, in wedding ads. In the way people imagine the ceremony before it even happens, a white dress does not just look like a dress anymore. It looks like a symbol of the bride, a symbol of the ceremony, a symbol of the moment when someone steps from one stage of life into another. But that symbolism was not always fixed. Before white became the expected bridal color, many women simply wore their best dress. That might mean blue, red, brown, gray, black, gold, green. Whatever was fashionable, available, practical, or meaningful in that place and time. For many families, clothing was expensive. A wedding dress was not always a one-day costume. It could be a good dress that would be worn again. That mattered. Most people could not afford to buy an elaborate white gown that would be difficult to clean and hard to reuse. White clothing was not practical for everyday life. It showed dirt. It required care. It could be expensive to maintain. So for ordinary brides, a dress that could be used again made more sense. That is an important point. The white wedding dress was not simply a moral symbol at first, it was also a fashion and status symbol. If someone could wear a fine white dress for a wedding, it said something. It suggested money. It suggested leisure. It suggested access to fabrics, cleaning, and a lifestyle where practicality did not have to come first. That is very different from the way people often explain it now. Today, many people say white means purity, and that meaning did become attached to the white wedding dress. But the full story is more complicated. The modern tradition was shaped heavily by one of the most famous weddings of the 19th century, the wedding of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert in 1840. Victoria was young, powerful, watched, and deeply visible. When she married Albert, she chose a white dress. That choice mattered because royal weddings were public events. People read about them. Illustrations spread. Fashion watchers paid attention. A queen's clothing was not just clothing. It became news. And Victoria's white wedding dress helped push white into the bridal imagination. She did not invent the idea of a bride wearing white. Other brides had worn white before her, but she made it famous. That distinction matters. A tradition does not always begin with the first person to do something. Sometimes it begins with the person everyone notices doing it. That is what happened here. Victoria's wedding gave white a huge cultural boost. Her dress was made of white satin and lace. It was elegant, visible, and widely discussed. And because Victoria was a queen, her choice carried influence. People looked at her wedding and saw a model, a standard, a dream, a look to imitate. That is how fashion spreads, not always by command, not always by rule, sometimes by admiration. A powerful person wears something, images circulate, writers describe it, other people copy it, then the copy becomes expectation. Over time, white bridal gowns became more fashionable among women who could afford them, and as the tradition grew, the meaning of the color changed too. White became more strongly connected with innocence, purity, and bridal virtue. That meaning became so familiar that many people later assumed it had always been the main reason. But the order is important. White became fashionable, then white gathered moral meaning, or at least the moral meaning became much louder after the fashion took hold. That does not mean purity had no connection to white before Victoria. White had long carried meanings of cleanliness, light, innocence, and religious symbolism in different settings. But the modern wedding dress tradition was not simply handed down unchanged from ancient times. It was shaped by fashion, media, royalty, class, and later symbolism. That is why the common explanation, brides wear white because it means purity, is only part of the story. It tells us what white came to mean. It does not fully explain how white became the wedding standard. To understand that, we have to see the wedding dress as a social signal. A white gown said more than one thing. It said beauty, it said status, it said fashion, it said the bride was participating in a certain ideal of marriage. As time passed, it also said purity and innocence. All of those meanings layered together. That layering is what makes wedding traditions so powerful. People do not always know where the tradition came from. They just know what it is supposed to feel like. A white dress feels bridal because generations of images taught people to see it that way. Paintings, photographs, royal weddings, department store displays, movies, family albums, bridal magazines, social media. Each one reinforces the same image. Bride equals white, white equals wedding, wedding equals tradition. After enough repetition, the image feels ancient, even when the specific modern tradition is not as old as people think. This is one of the most important lessons in the story. Some traditions feel timeless because they are repeated so often, not because they have always existed in the same form. A tradition can be powerful and still be relatively modern. A tradition can feel sacred and still be shaped by fashion. A tradition can seem universal and still belong mostly to certain cultures and histories. That is true of the white wedding dress. In many parts of the world, bridal clothing has used other colors for centuries. Red, for example, is important in many wedding traditions because it can symbolize joy, luck, prosperity, fertility, or celebration. Gold can signal wealth, blessing, or beauty. Other colors can carry family, regional, or religious meaning, so white is not the universal wedding color. It is a tradition that became especially powerful in Western bridal culture, then spread widely through global fashion and media. That matters because it reminds us that wedding customs are not all the same. A wedding dress is never just fabric. It carries a story about the people wearing it and the culture watching it. For some brides, white may mean faith. For others, it may mean family tradition. For others, it may simply mean elegance. For others, it may be chosen because it feels classic. And for some, white may not be the right choice at all. That does not make the wedding less meaningful. It only shows that traditions change with people. The white dress became famous because it fit a particular dream of the wedding. A beautiful bride, a public ceremony, a special gown, a day set apart from ordinary life. White helped create that feeling because white is visually different from most daily clothing. It stands out, it catches light, it photographs clearly, it separates the bride from the crowd. That visual power helped the tradition survive. A white dress is dramatic without needing bright color. It draws attention through contrast. That made it perfect for the role it came to play. The bride becomes the visual center of the ceremony. The dress announces that this is not an ordinary day, but there is a practical irony here. White became popular partly because it looked special and delicate, yet for many people, that is exactly why it was once impractical. A white gown could be hard to clean, hard to reuse, easy to stain. That made it less sensible for everyday life and more powerful as a ceremonial object. It said, "This dress is for this moment." A dress that could not easily be worn for ordinary work became a sign that the day itself was extraordinary. That is part of how luxury turns into ritual. Something impractical becomes meaningful because it is impractical. It says the event is important enough to step outside normal life. That is the same reason people use special flowers, special music, special food, and special clothing. The wedding is not supposed to feel like a normal day. The dress helps mark the difference. Queen Victoria's dress did that on a massive public scale. Her choice was personal, fashionable, and symbolic all at once. She was not just dressing as a monarch, she was presenting herself as a bride. That image was powerful. And because she was so visible, her wedding helped shape what other people imagined their own weddings could look like. Over time, the white dress became more accessible. Industrial changes, fashion production, magazines, photography, and later mass media helped spread the style. More women could see the look. More shops could sell versions of it. More families could imagine it as the proper bridal choice. The tradition became stronger each time it was repeated. By the time many modern brides were growing up, white was not seen as one option among many. It was seen as the wedding dress. That is how a fashion choice becomes an expectation. At first, it is noticed. Then it is copied, then it is admired, then it is repeated. Then people forget there was ever another way. But there was another way. There were many other ways, and there still are. That is why the story of white wedding dresses is not just about weddings. It is about how traditions are made. A custom can begin with status. It can be shaped by royalty. It can be spread by media. It can gather moral meaning after the fact. Then, after enough time, people treat it as if it has always been the rule. The white wedding dress is a perfect example. It looks ancient. It feels classic. But the modern expectation owes a great deal to the 19th century and the influence of Queen Victoria. That does not make the tradition fake. Traditions do not have to be ancient to be meaningful. A white dress can still be beautiful. It can still matter deeply to the person wearing it. It can still carry family, faith, memory, and emotion. But understanding the origin helps us see the tradition more clearly. It was not simply handed down from the beginning of time. It was built by fashion, by class, by a royal wedding, by public attention, by changing ideas about purity, by generations of brides choosing or being expected to choose white. That is the real story. So, why do brides wear white? In modern Western tradition, brides wear white largely because Queen Victoria's 1840 wedding helped popularize the white bridal gown. Before that, brides often wore many different colors, including their best practical dress. White later became strongly associated with purity, innocence, and bridal tradition, but it was also tied to fashion, status, publicity, and the power of a royal example. The white wedding dress did not come from one simple rule. It became tradition because one famous image was copied, repeated, and given meaning over time. A queen wore white. The world noticed. Other brides followed, and eventually, a color became a symbol. If you enjoyed discovering the story behind this everyday tradition, subscribe to Everyday Sayings and Origins. Each episode uncovers the hidden history behind the words, phrases, rhymes, and traditions we use without thinking. I'm Earl. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next origin. Peace.